Welcome to Chapter 5 of Internal Auditing. Today we're going to look at a little more detail here about business processes and risk. I think the book does a good job here of defining business processes. This is something that really applies not just to internal audit, but to business in general, of understanding what a process is, process as some call it. It's really just a set of connected activities that when linked together, they have a purpose of achieving an objective or objectives. On page 5-3 here, they go into the detailed operating processes, which for most organizations, that's the core processes which a company is attempting to achieve its primary objectives. Now, a term they also use here are called projects. In the middle of page 5-3, value creating activities. And this structure is called projects. And they break it down into these processes, and the book does a good job on 5-5 with these basic classifications, 14 of them. And dropping down to the bottom at the project level, they've got two different ones, 13 and 14. And 13 is project operations, where you're identifying assets, maybe purchasing assets. We talked about that in financial accounting, about the CIP category and assets, where we accumulate on the debit side all the expenditures and so forth for the asset. And then once it's fully operational, it's moved out of CIP into an asset to be depreciated. That's when it starts to drive revenue. Well, that's a capital project in a sense of identifying these assets, developing the concept, the design and sourcing of that, executing, which is implementing and operating. In this case, in number 13, it's talking about handing this off. So maybe this is a project, take, for example, this football stadium that ETSU built several years ago. Burwell was the contractor, the primary, and of course they subbed out a lot of it, but they actually were in charge of this project. And then once the stadium was complete, then it was turned over to ETSU or the state of Tennessee as being a capital improvement. But also you've got project delivery there, which is process 14. I guess I've got those reversed. 14 is the one I gave the example for there of ETSU in the stadium, where it's being handed off like Burwell did to ETSU. 13 is when you're investing in your own processes, projects, and so forth that you then put into service, and then it starts being depreciated as a fixed asset. So I got those reversed, but that's 13 and 14. And these are supposed to be value creating activities, these projects driving revenue, which is why you invest in these assets. So that's a part of the business process. Now, several other of these classifications here, and there's 14 of them on page 5-4 and 5-5, 14 basic classifications, some very high level there with the operating processes, understanding the environment, developing strategy, designing the product or service, and selling that, and then producing a product or delivering service. That's really a top level view of what's taking place there. Or a top-down approach, which we look at there at the bottom of page 5-5. The two common approaches to help us understand business processes is the top-down from that level, or from the bottom up when you look at the process at the activity level, from accounts payable or purchasing, purchase to payable cycle, or payroll and HR, and the processes at the lowest level. Those people who are responsible for those actual activities is a bottom-up approach as opposed to a top-down. But these processes that must be identified there in middle of page 5-7, questions that are asked are, why do these processes exist? Obviously, purchase to payables is the control of the purchasing, procurement, payment cycle for your goods that you are procuring. How does this process support their organization's strategy and contribute to its success? How are people expected to act? They go into procedural manuals, process procedural manuals, policies related to the process. Another part of that is your documents. What documents are being used? Now, a lot of companies will have a forms explosion at some point where they take all forms that are being filled out, who is filling out the form, who's using the forms. And that type of value stream mapping, where you're trying to decide what's cost added and what's value added. You want to eliminate your cost adders and focus on the value added activities. Same thing with your documents. Are people putting these documents together and filling them out and nobody's using them? Reports are some way. Documents and reports, two key paper flows in an organization. It doesn't have to just be on paper. It can be electronic as well. It can be electronic junk. What are the job descriptions of the people involved in the process? What are the process maps that describe the process flow? They use some common process mapping symbols there on the bottom of page 5-9. Those are old. Those are 30-some years old back when I was doing these type diagrams. Of course, those have progressed into data flow diagrams. And today you hear a lot about value stream mapping. Got ahead of myself a little bit, going back to 5-4. Again, understanding the business processes. Internal auditors want to add value and increase the organization's performance. It's not just about catching someone doing something wrong to eliminate fraud. It is about increasing efficiency and their effectiveness. But the first level of that is internal audit has to understand the processes in your business in order to be able to help. Of course, it starts with the organization's vision, mission, and what those values are, and what's the set of boundaries to be used. All right, so that brings us over here to, I guess we turn back to 5-5 again. I sort of skipped the middle part there. Management and support processes, managing HR, managing the financials, right? Managing IT, managing physical resources, managing compliance with laws and regulations, managing external relationships. Those are all very important, but those operating processes, and they do a great job here on 5-5, those operating processes is what's driving your ultimate goal of making money, of providing a service or providing a good. And then those project level operations is, what are you investing in to drive your performance? Let's see here. Let's turn then to 5-8, documenting business processes, documenting the flow. Again, bottom of page 5-9, common mapping symbols. You've all used those in Dr. Berg's class in data analytics, which used to be called accounting information systems. And they show a little bit of that at the top of page 5-9. The original example that gave you there, someone attending class in order to pass a course, in order to ultimately get a degree, get a job. And they use a very straightforward example there, starting the various things you have to do, collecting materials for tomorrow, sleep, get up, get dressed, drive to school, arrive in classroom, and so forth. But these 4 different flows, process or operation decision, is always I'm not sure what you call it. I don't remember high school geometry. Decision box, the flow line, the terminator. But documenting that, again, now what's called value stream mapping is used a lot, which is sort of replaced data flow diagrams, which is somewhat replaced as flow charting, as it used to be called 40 years ago. And there on 5-10, they show you this flow chart. They call it a process map. It's really a flow chart of what goes on with someone getting ready to go to class, and all the things associated with preparing for class and getting to class. So then we look at 5-11, the basic business risk module. You can read that on your own. 5-12, 5-13 is a risk assessment model. 5-12, they got impact on the left side and likelihood on the right. Impact goes from negligible, which is very little, to extreme. That's why it goes from a green up to a yellow. you go out to the right, what's the likelihood? Meaning if it's got a 1% chance of something being extreme, then it's still yellow, even though it's only 1%. But look what happens if it's 90 to 100% likelihood and the impact is extreme. Then you're out there in a dark red, 25%, right? Or a estimation. And then when you start putting some verbiage on that in 5-9, identification of critical task, or excuse me, critical risk, catastrophic events from governance. I mean, it's remote that would happen. The impact. But look at some of the things out there, they're getting into the red. Availability, economics, business continuity, privacy. Look at litigation and illegal acts, budgeting, debt integrity. I guess privacy is violation of privacy. Turning to 5-15, mapping the risk to the business process. We talked about this last time with avoidance and reduction. Similar yet different. Look what it says about avoidance. This ERM perspective from chapter 4 for this risk assessment. A decision is made to exit or divest of the activities giving rise to the risk. Risk avoidance may involve, for example, exiting a product line, deciding not to expand to a new geographical market, or selling a division. So you don't have to worry about risk anymore with avoidance. And then reduction is you're going to continue maybe those operations, but how are you going to lessen the risk? Impact, the likelihood, or both. The impact or likelihood, the chart we just looked at. Implementing controls, that's usually how people handle that. What about sharing and acceptance? All right. Continuing on through here. Exhibit 5-12 shows the risk factor approach, the weighting of each one of those 10 items, these 10 factors. And they quantify that, like with assets at risk, if it's less than $500,000, from 500,000 to 5 million, greater than 5 million, of course, it just depends on the size of the organization. It's all relative. We do that for each of those to come up with a weighted score. And then using that risk factor approach there on 5-13, part of our assurance engagement. And you can read this on your own and attempt to chart this over on 5-23 and again on 5-16, or excuse me, exhibit 5-15 on page 523 and then the next page as well in exhibit 516. Taking what's being described there, the risk statement. Look at risk 1, forgets to pack homework assignments. Well, that's a 1. That's right about in the middle for impact and likelihood. Moderate, right? Let's look at number 4. 4 is up there in the red, right? High in impact and high likelihood, high probability. So what is 4? Forget to turn on the alarm. That can be a big deal if you don't set your alarm in the morning, especially if you're a young person. If you get older, you don't have to worry about alarms, do you? You tend to get up as soon as the sun comes up. Number 8 is another one. It's red. It's about halfway. Turns off alarm and goes back to sleep. Well, at least the alarm was on. But what's the likelihood that you're going to turn the alarm off? Of course, they talk about the snooze button as well. What's 2? Forgets to put in cell phone. Well, it's a high likelihood, right? But low impact of not having your cell phone. All right, so that is chapter 5. Again, do the homework that's prescribed in the handout. Unless I change it otherwise, it would be on the syllabus. The syllabus supersedes what I would say in the video. But do the multiple choice questions and I'll obviously do the case number 2 as I've prescribed. I don't think I'm going to change that. You know, what they asked for in this case too on 5-37 Says select a company that has undergone an IPO, initial public offering, in the last 5 years, and obtain a prospectus. These are available on the company's website. Edgar for companies listed on the U.S. Stock Exchange, and answer those questions. Again, it should be at least 1,000 words, 12 font, and just select a company. I know one that's come out here just recently was Airbnb. You know, a lot of people are booking rooms now, or homes, wherever they go on vacation. Airbnb, Air Bed and Breakfast, that's one I know has come up lately. Robinhood, you know, the debacle here lately that came up, well, from the hedge fund manager's viewpoint. Robinhood, which enables, it's the app that enables investing, and they were able to manipulate stock prices. Robinhood, I think, is going public. This is May 20th, 2021. I believe they're getting ready to go public if they haven't already. That's one. But find one of those, and then you need to answer those 5 questions, A through E, in case 2 for chapter 5. All right, so that's the assignment, and we'll talk again soon about chapter 6.